The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly was the largest building ever made by any species in the known universe. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, and its walls were made of crystal that had taken 200 years to grow. Light from distant suns passed through those walls and painted everything in soft colors. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned places, arranged in a massive circle that seemed to go on forever. Admiral Tejo stood near the back of the human section. He wore his dress uniform, the dark blue one with silver buttons that humans used for important occasions. His face showed nothing. He had learned long ago to hide his feelings in this place. Showing emotion here was seen as weakness, and the other species already thought humans were weak enough. Ambassador Sohee walked to the central platform. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but today those eyes were hard as stone. She had served as humanity's voice in this chamber for 20 years. She had smiled through insults. She had stayed calm when the Valari delegate called humans clever animals. She had not raised her voice when the Torath representative suggested that human colonies should pay double taxes because humans bred too quickly. 20 years of smiling, 20 years of swallowing her pride. Today, that ended. The chamber fell silent as she reached the speaking platform. The Valari delegate, a tall creature with shiny black skin and clicking mandibles, leaned forward with interest. The Torath representative, a massive being covered in thick scales and sharp teeth, did not bother to hide his bored expression. The Nimari High Custodian, whose body was made of hundreds of thin tentacles wrapped around a central core, waved dismissively before Sohee even began to speak. Sohee placed her datapad on the crystal podium. She looked around the room slowly, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as she could. Some looked away. Most did not bother to look at her at all. 312 years ago, Sohee began, her voice clear and steady. Humanity received its first message from beyond our solar system. We were afraid, but we were also hopeful. We thought we were joining a community. We thought we would find friends among the stars. A few delegates made sounds that might have been laughter. The Torath representative yawned, showing rows of sharp teeth. Sohee continued as if she had not noticed. We came to this assembly with open hands. We shared our art, our music, our stories. We offered trade. We asked for nothing except to be treated fairly. And you were treated fairly, the Valari delegate interrupted, his mandibles clicking rapidly. You were given a seat in this chamber. You were allowed to trade. What more could your primitive species want? We wanted respect, Sohee said quietly. We wanted safety for our colonies. We wanted justice. When your ships burned our settlements on Kepler 7, the chamber stirred. The incident at Kepler 7 was not supposed to be mentioned. 4 years ago, Valari warships had destroyed a human farming colony of 12,000 people. They claimed it was a mistake, a navigation error. The assembly had investigated for 3 months and then declared the matter closed. No punishment, no compensation, just silence. That matter was resolved, the Valari delegate said coldly. 12,000 people were killed. Children were killed. The matter was not resolved. It was buried. Sohee's voice remained calm, but her hands were shaking slightly, just like the Torath raids on our merchant ships were buried, just like the unfair trade sanctions were buried, just like every crime against humanity has been buried for 300 years. Admiral Tejo watched the faces of the alien delegates. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked annoyed, like parents dealing with a troublesome child. None of them looked guilty. None of them cared. The Nimari High Custodian rose, his tentacles rippling with impatience. Ambassador, this assembly does not have time for human complaints. If you have legitimate business, present it. Otherwise, return to your seat. Sohee smiled. It was not a warm smile. I do have business, High Custodian. Very important business. She tapped her datapad. The holographic displays around the chamber flickered and showed a single document written in the common galactic language. By the authority granted to me by the United Human Government, Sohee announced, I hereby declare that humanity officially withdraws from the Galactic Assembly. This withdrawal is effective immediately. All treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic arrangements between humanity and assembly member species are now void. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the laughter began. It started with the Torath representative, a deep booming sound that echoed through the crystal hall. The Valari delegate joined in, his mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among his kind. Soon, half the chamber was laughing. The sound washed over Sohi like a wave. But she did not move. She did not react. "Run home then, mammals," the Nimari High Custodian said, waving a tentacle dismissively. "The galaxy will not notice your absence. Your little fleet of 8,000 ships means nothing. Your 12 colony worlds mean nothing. You are children playing at being a civilization." Sohi waited for the laughter to die down. Then she turned to Admiral Tejo and nodded once. Tejo walked forward to stand beside her. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and a face that had seen many battles. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle. That softness was more frightening than any shout. "You misunderstand," he said. "We are not running away. We are not hiding." He looked at the Nimari High Custodian, with eyes that held no fear and no anger. Only a terrible patience. "We are done pretending." "Pretending?" The Valari delegate sounded amused. "Pretending what?" "Pretending to be weak." Tejo let those words hang in the air. "Pretending to be patient. Pretending that we needed you." Tejo let those words. Tejo let those words. "Pretending to be patient." He smiled, and something in that smile made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. It was the smile of someone who knew something they did not. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "For 300 years, humanity has played by your rules," Tejo continued. "We followed your laws. We accepted your insults. We buried our dead and said nothing. Do you know why?" No one answered. "Because we hoped you would change. We hoped that if we were patient enough, kind enough, peaceful enough, you would eventually see us as equals." He shook his head slowly. "We were wrong. You will never see us as equals. You will only see us as prey." He turned and began walking toward the exit. Sohi followed him. The other human delegates rose from their seats and joined them, moving in perfect silence. "You cannot simply leave," the Torath representative growled. "There are procedures. Forms to be filed. Negotiations to be conducted." Sohi paused at the door and looked back over her shoulder. "We are no longer bound by your procedures. We are no longer members of your assembly. We are no longer your partners or your allies or your friends." She met the eyes of every delegate who dared to look at her. "We are something else now. Something you have never seen. Something you have spent 300 years creating through your cruelty and your arrogance." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "We are your consequence." The human delegation walked out. The crystal doors sealed behind them with a sound like thunder. In the great hall of the Galactic Assembly, 46 species sat in confused silence. Some were still laughing nervously. Some were annoyed at the dramatic display. Some were already planning how to divide up human territory among themselves. None of them understood what had just happened. None of them realized that the universe had just changed forever. None of them knew that dread had begun. 3 months passed after humanity left the assembly. 3 months of waiting for something to happen. 3 months of nothing. Intelligence Director Hyun Woo of the Valari Dominion sat in his office and stared at the reports on his desk. 17 spy ships had been sent into human space. Not one had returned. Not one had sent a distress signal. Not one had left even a piece of wreckage behind. They had simply disappeared, as if they had flown into a black hole. Hyun-woo clicked his mandibles nervously. He had served the Dominion for 60 years. He had seen wars and rebellions and disasters of every kind. He had never seen anything like this. The humans had always been so open before. Their borders were easy to cross. Their communications were easy to intercept. Their military movements were easy to track. Now, everything had changed. Human space had become a wall of silence. No signals came out. No ships came out. Nothing. He called his assistant and ordered another report. The assistant returned with the same information as before. Nothing. Only silence. On the border world of Kethis 4, things were even more strange. Commander Golmar, of the Toreth hegemony, commanded the military base there. He had 15,000 soldiers under his command and 40 warships in orbit. He was not afraid of humans. He had fought humans before. Back when he was young. They died just like anyone else. But the silence was getting to him. Every day, he sent patrol ships along the border. Every day, they reported the same thing. No human ships. No human signals. No human activity of any kind. It was as if 12 colony worlds and billions of people had simply vanished. Then, one morning, a message came. Golmar was eating his breakfast when his communications officer burst into the room. The officer was shaking. Toreth did not shake. They were warriors. They feared nothing, but this officer was shaking like a leaf in a storm. "Sir," the officer said, "we received a transmission from a human ship." Golmar put down his food and stood up. "Show me." They went to the communication center. The message was already playing on the main screen. It was just one word. Repeated over and over in every known language in the galaxy. The word hung in the air, simple and terrible. Soon. That was all. Just that one word. Soon. The message played for 30 seconds and then stopped. The source of the transmission could not be traced. It had come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Golmar ordered his soldiers to high alert. He doubled the patrols. He requested reinforcements from the hegemony. But deep inside, in a place he would never admit existed, he felt something cold growing. Something he had not felt in many years. Something that felt like fear. Far away, on the Naimari homeworld, a very different meeting was taking place. The High Council had gathered in their ancient chamber, a room that had seen 10,000 years of decisions. High Custodian Elvith sat at the head of the table. His tendrils coiled with worry. Around him, the other council members waited in nervous silence. They had summoned someone, a human, a woman named Minji who had left her people decades ago to live among the Naimari. She had been useful to them. She understood human thinking. She could explain their strange ways. Minji entered the chamber slowly. She was old now, her hair white and her face lined with years. But her eyes were sharp and clear, and she walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. "You know why we called you," Elvith said without greeting. "Your people have gone silent. We need to know what they are planning." Minji stood in the center of the chamber and looked at the council members one by one. She had lived among them for 40 years. She had learned their customs, spoken their language, eaten their food, but she had never truly been one of them. They had made sure of that. "You want to know what humans are planning," she repeated. "I will tell you what I know. Though you will not like it." "Speak," Elvith commanded. Minji smiled. And something in that smile made several council members uncomfortable. It was the same smile that Admiral Tejo had worn in the assembly chamber. The same knowing, patient smile. "Do you know why humans always smile during negotiations?" she asked. "Why we always seem so calm, so willing to accept your terms?" "Because you are weak," Elvith said. "Because you had no choice." "No." Minji shook her head slowly. "Because we were holding ourselves back. We were being patient. We were giving you chance after chance to treat us with basic respect." She began to walk around the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. "You see, other species evolved to fight when they felt threatened. When danger came, you attacked or you ran. That was your survival strategy." She paused by one of the ancient windows and looked out at the city beyond. "Humans evolved differently. We evolved to endure, to remember, to plan. To plan. What does that mean?" one of the council members asked. Minji turned back to face them. It means that when something hurts us, we do not forget. We cannot forget. Our brains are built to hold on to pain, to turn it over and over, until we find a way to make sure it never happens again. She walked back to the center of the chamber. You spent 300 years teaching humanity that the galaxy would never accept us as equals. You burned our colonies. You killed our people. You laughed at our pain. Congratulations, High Custodian. The lesson was received. Elveth's tendrils rippled with anger. You dare threaten the council? I am not threatening anyone. I am explaining. Minji's voice remained calm. Humans do not have a word for forgive and forget. Did you know that? We have words for grudge, for vendetta, for revenge, for reckoning. But there is no human word that means to forgive something and then forget it happened. She met Elveth's many eyes without flinching. For 300 years, humanity has been keeping count. Every insult, every death, every broken promise, every cruel laugh in that assembly chamber, it is all written down somewhere. It is all remembered. What are they planning? Elveth demanded. Minji was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, almost sad. I do not know exactly what they are planning. I left human space a long time ago. But I know this. Whatever it is, you will not see it coming. Humans are not like you. We do not roar and charge and make big displays of power. We wait, we watch, we learn. And when we finally act, it is already too late. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. You asked me once why humans tell so many stories about monsters, about creatures that hide in the dark and wait for the right moment to strike. I told you it was just our imagination. She looked back over her shoulder. I was lying. Those stories are warnings. They are reminders of what we are capable of becoming when we are pushed too far. She walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council sat in silence. The room felt colder than before. The shadows in the corners seemed darker. For the first time in 10,000 years, the leaders of the Nimari felt something they had almost forgotten how to feel. They felt dread. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, humanity continued its silence. No messages, no movements, no signs of what was coming. Just the waiting, just the quiet. The galaxy had spent 300 years poking a sleeping giant. Now the giant was awake, and it was smiling. The Valari fortress of Ashketh Prime was the most heavily defended place in 3-star systems. It floated in space like a metal mountain, covered with weapons and shields and sensors. 12 battlecruisers circled it like guard dogs. 50,000 soldiers lived inside its walls. Defense platforms surrounded it in every direction, each one capable of destroying a small moon. Commander Vekthar had served at Ashketh Prime for 30 years. He had seen raids and attacks, and even one small war. The fortress had never fallen. It had never even come close to falling. He was proud of this record. He believed the fortress was unbreakable. He was wrong. The attack came at night cycle, when the lights were dimmed and half the crew was sleeping. There was no warning, no enemy ships on the sensors, no missiles or energy beams or explosions. One moment, everything was normal. The next moment, everything was dying. Vekthar was in his quarters when the first alarms went off. He jumped out of bed and ran to the command center. The corridors were filled with chaos. Soldiers were running in every direction. Some were screaming. Some were lying on the floor, not moving at all. He reached the command center and found only bodies. Every officer at every station was dead. They sat in their chairs with their eyes open and their mouths frozen in silent screams. There were no wounds on them, no blood, no signs of violence. They had simply stopped living. Vekthar tried to call for help, but the communication systems were dead. He tried to activate the weapons, but they did not respond. He tried to access the sensors, but they showed only static. The entire fortress had been shut down like a light being switched off. Through the viewports, he could see the battlecruisers drifting in space. Their engines were dark. Their weapons were silent. They were just floating there. Dead metal in the void. In the detention block, deep in the belly of the fortress, a man named Hajin opened his eyes. He had been a prisoner here for 2 years. He was a human soldier, captured during a border skirmish that the Assembly had called a misunderstanding. The Valari had kept him alive for questioning. They wanted to know about human defenses, human weapons, human secrets. He had told them nothing. Now, he stood up from his bed and walked to the cell door. It was already open. The guards who usually stood outside were lying on the floor, not breathing. Hajin stepped over them and began walking down the corridor. He was not surprised by what he saw. He had been waiting for this. He had known it would come eventually. Humanity did not forget its people. Humanity did not leave anyone behind. He found a working communication terminal in one of the smaller offices. The bodies of the officers who had worked there were slumped over their desks. Hajin pushed one aside gently and activated the broadcast system. The terminal flickered to life. A miracle in a dead fortress. "This message is for the Galactic Assembly," Hajin said into the recorder. His voice was calm and clear. "My name is Hajin. I am a human soldier who was held prisoner at Ashketh Prime. As you can see, the fortress has fallen." He paused and looked around at the silent room. "You are probably wondering how this happened. Let me explain. For the past 80 years, humanity has had faster-than-light travel. Real faster-than-light travel. Not the slow method that the Assembly uses. We kept it secret because we did not want to frighten you. We wanted to be your friends." He walked to the viewport and looked out at the drifting battlecruisers. "We also developed weapons that we hoped we would never use. Quantum disruption fields that can shut down any technology within a certain range. Neural cascade emitters that can stop biological processes instantly and painlessly. Nanodissolution swarms that can take apart matter at the molecular level." He turned back to the camera. "We kept these things hidden because we believed in peace. We believed that if we showed good faith, you would eventually accept us. We were patient. We were kind. We were everything you asked us to be." His voice remained steady. But there was something in his eyes now. Not anger. Something deeper than anger. Something older. "You had 300 years to treat us with basic dignity. You chose cruelty instead. You burned our colonies. You killed our families. You laughed when we asked for justice. And through it all, we kept being patient. We kept hoping you would change." He shook his head slowly. "We were fools. You never intended to change. You enjoyed hurting us. You liked feeling powerful. You thought we would always be there for you to kick whenever you were bored." Hajin sat down in one of the empty chairs and looked directly into the camera. "On Earth, our oldest stories are about what happens when patient people stop being patient. We have tales of gentle farmers who become warriors, of quiet men who become storms, of small things that grow into monsters when they are pushed too far." He leaned forward. "You pushed us too far. Now you will learn why those stories exist. Now you will understand why humanity remembers everything." He smiled, and it was not a kind smile. The fortress of Ashketh Prime fell in 9 minutes. No battle. No warning. Just silence and death. This was not an attack. This was a demonstration. This was us showing you what we can do when we stop holding back. He stood up and walked toward the door. "More demonstrations will follow. Not invasions. Not wars. Just silence. Just emptiness. Just the disappearance of everything you thought was safe." At the door, he paused and looked back at the camera one more time. "We do not want to destroy you. We never did. But we will not be your victims anymore. The old rules are over. The new rules are being written. And this time, humanity holds the pen." The transmission ended. Within 1 week, 14 Valari systems went silent. No battles were fought. No fleets were sent. Just darkness spreading across the stars like a disease. Worlds that had held billions of people became empty. Ships that had patrolled the trade routes became drifting tombs. Stations that had buzzed with activity became graveyards. The Assembly sent investigators. None of them returned. They sent more spy ships. None of them returned either. They sent messages demanding explanations, threatening consequences, begging for mercy. There was no response. Only silence. On the Torith homeworld, Fleet Marshal Cothran called an emergency meeting of the military council. They had to do something. They had to respond. They could not let this stand. "We will attack Earth itself," he declared. "We will gather every ship in the hegemony and burn their homeworld to ash. That will end this." The other generals agreed. It was the only way. Show strength. Show that the galaxy would not be intimidated by a few tricks. They did not understand that strength was not the answer. They did not understand that they were dealing with something new. Something patient and quiet and very, very angry. They did not understand that dread was just beginning, and in the darkness between stars, humanity watched and waited. They had planned this for a long time. They had hoped it would never be necessary. But hope had died in that assembly chamber, killed by laughter and contempt. Now there was only the plan, only the demonstrations, only the slow, careful education of a galaxy that had forgotten how to fear. Lesson 1 was complete. Lesson 2 was coming. And the galaxy was finally beginning to understand that some things, once broken, cannot be fixed. Panic spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The news of Ashketh Prime and the 14 silent worlds traveled faster than any ship. Every species, every government, every individual who heard the reports felt the same cold knot forming in their stomach. Something had changed. Something fundamental. The rules they had always known no longer applied. The Torith hegemony responded the only way they knew how. With force, Fleet Marshal Cothran gathered every warship in the hegemony. He called in ships from distant outposts. He emptied patrol routes and border stations. He stripped colony defenses down to nothing. When he was done, he had assembled 800,000 warships. It was the largest fleet in galactic history. Nothing could stand against such power. Nothing. The fleet moved toward human space in a formation that stretched across light years. Cothran stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, and watched the stars pass by. He was not afraid. He was never afraid. Fear was for the weak. Fear was for humans. They reached the edge of Sol system in 3 days. The human homeworld lay before them. A small blue marble hanging in space. It looked so fragile, so vulnerable. Cothran smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This would be over quickly. Then the sensors showed something strange. A single ship was approaching. Just one ship. A small cruiser. Barely large enough to be noticed among the massive Torith warships. "This is Admiral Yurin of the HSS Remembrance," came the broadcast. The voice was calm and pleasant, like someone inviting guests for dinner. "We are transmitting coordinates to your flagship. Fleet Marshal Cothran may board for negotiation." Cothran laughed. The sound echoed through his bridge. "Negotiation? One ship against 800,000, and they want to negotiate?" His officers laughed with him. It was absurd. It was the funniest thing they had ever heard. The humans had finally lost their minds. "I will go," Cothran decided. "I want to see the fear in their eyes before we destroy them." He took a shuttle to the human cruiser. It was a small vessel, plain and unremarkable. Nothing special about it at all. Inside, the corridors were empty and quiet. His guards followed him closely, weapons ready, but there was no one to fight, no one to kill. He found a conference room with a single occupant. A human woman with gray-streaked hair and calm eyes. She sat at a small table with her hands folded in front of her. She did not stand when he entered. She did not show any sign of fear or respect. "Fleet Marshal Cothran," she said. "Thank you for coming. I am Admiral Yurin. Please, sit." Cothran remained standing. His guards flanked him on either side, their weapons pointed at the small woman. "You have one chance to surrender," he growled. "Give up your weapons. Give up your colonies. Bow before the hegemony, and we may let some of your people survive." Yurin nodded slowly, as if considering his words. "That is very generous. But I have a different offer. You are in no position to make offers. Your fleet will be destroyed within the hour if you do not withdraw, Yeren said. Her voice was still calm, still pleasant. She might have been discussing the weather. This is not a threat. It is simply a fact. Cawthron felt anger rising in his chest. You have one ship. Yes, Yeren agreed. And you have 800,000. Do you know what I have that you do not? She gestured toward the viewport. Outside, space seemed normal. Stars and darkness, and the distant shapes of the Torith fleet. Then, for just a moment, something changed. Space rippled, like the surface of water when a stone is thrown in. It lasted only a second, and then everything looked normal again. Humanity has spent 3 centuries studying you, Yeren said. All of you, every species in the assembly. We learned your languages, your cultures, your beliefs. We also learned your biology, your weaknesses, the specific ways that each of you can be hurt. She stood and walked to the viewport, her back to the Torith guards and their weapons. We know how to kill Valari quickly and painlessly. We know how to shut down Namari nervous systems in seconds. We know the exact frequency that causes Torith hearts to stop beating. She turned to face Cawthron. We developed these weapons long ago. We simply chose not to use them. We chose diplomacy, peace, cooperation. Her voice hardened. You taught us that was foolish. You taught us that kindness was weakness. You taught us that the only thing the galaxy respects is power. She stepped closer to Cawthron, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that made him want to step back. So now we teach you something in return. What? Cawthron managed to say. Dread. The word hung in the air between them. Not the fear of death. Death is simple. Death is quick. Dread is something else. Dread is lying awake at night wondering if the air you breathe is still safe. Dread is looking at your food and wondering if something invisible is waiting inside it. Dread is seeing shadows in the corners and not knowing if they were always there. She smiled, and it did not reach her eyes. Your fleet has already been seeded with nano-agents. Microscopic machines, smaller than dust, floating in every ship in your armada. Right now, they are dormant. They are doing nothing. But at any moment, with a single command, they could become active. Cawthron felt cold. Actually cold. He had not felt cold in decades. Toroth were warm-blooded creatures, their internal temperatures always stable. But now, standing in this small room with this small woman, he felt ice spreading through his veins. You are lying, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps, there is only one way to find out. Yeren gestured toward the communication console. Give the order to attack. See what happens. For a long moment, no one moved. Cawthron's guards looked at each other nervously. Their weapons were still raised, but their hands were trembling slightly. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Cawthron thought about his fleet. 800,000 ships. Millions of soldiers. The greatest military force ever assembled. He thought about ordering them to attack. He thought about what might happen if the human was telling the truth. What do you want? He finally asked. Withdrawal, Yeren said simply. Take your fleet and go home. Tell the assembly that the negotiating table is open again. This time, humanity will set the terms. And if we refuse? Yeren was quiet for a moment. Then she walked to the viewport and looked out at the distant Earth, hanging blue and beautiful in the darkness. There is a human concept called mutually assured destruction, she said softly. It means that if you hurt us, we will hurt you back so badly that victory becomes meaningless. We developed this concept long ago, when we only had to worry about fighting each other. She turned back to face him. We did not want to bring this concept to the stars. We wanted the galaxy to be better than that. But you gave us no choice. So now, mutually assured destruction applies to everyone. If you attack Earth, your worlds will burn. If you kill our people, your people will die. Not in battle, not in glory, just silence and emptiness. spreading through your empire like a disease. She sat back down at the table and folded her hands. The choice is yours, Fleet Marshal. You can start a war that will destroy both of our peoples, or you can go home and tell your leaders that humanity is ready to talk. Really, talk. As equals. Cawthron stood there for a long time. His guards waited. The ship hummed softly around them. Outside, the greatest fleet in history drifted in silence, waiting for orders. Finally, Cawthron turned and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back. "This is not over," he said. "No," Yaren agreed. "It is just beginning. But for the first time, it is beginning on equal terms." The Toreth fleet withdrew within the hour. No shots were fired. No battles were won or lost. Just 800,000 ships turning around and going home, leaving Earth untouched behind them. And across the galaxy, every species that was watching felt the same thing. Not relief. Not anger. Just dread, settling into their bones like frost. The rules had changed forever. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was something else entirely. 1 year had passed since the Toreth fleet retreated from Sol system. 1 year of tense silence and careful negotiations. 1 year of a galaxy learning to see humanity in a completely different way. The Galactic Assembly reconvened, but not in their ancient crystal hall between the stars. That hall was empty now. A monument to the old ways that had died. The new meeting place was in orbit around Earth, on a station that humanity had built in just 3 months. It was not as beautiful as the Crystal Hall, but it was a symbol, a reminder of who held the power now. Ambassador Nari stood at the central podium and looked out at the gathered delegates. She was young for an ambassador, barely 40 years old, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and steel. She had been chosen specifically for this moment because she represented what humanity wanted to become. Not conquerors. Not destroyers. Just people who wanted to live in peace. The representatives of 46 species watched her in silence. No one was laughing now. No one was making dismissive gestures or whispering insults. They sat in their assigned seats and waited, their bodies tense with the fear that had become their constant companion over the past year. "Thank you all for coming," Nari began. Her voice was warm but firm. "I know this has been a difficult year for everyone. I know that many of you are afraid. I want you to understand that fear was never our goal." She paused and looked around the room, making eye contact with as many delegates as she could. "Humanity did not want this. We did not want to become something that frightens you. For 300 years, we tried to be your partners, your friends, your equals. We offered you our hands in friendship, and you slapped them away. We offered you trade, and you demanded tribute. We asked for justice, and you gave us contempt." Her voice remained steady, but there was emotion beneath the words. "We had a choice. We could accept our place as the galaxy's victims, or we could change the rules. We chose to change the rules. We chose to stop being prey. We chose to show you what we were truly capable of, so that you would finally take us seriously." She gestured, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber. They showed the new accord, a document that had taken a year to negotiate. Every word had been argued over, every clause had been examined. It was the foundation of a new galactic order. "This document represents our demands," Nari said. "I will summarize the main points." She began to read. Equal representation in all galactic bodies. Fair trade agreements with no special taxes or restrictions on human goods. Full reparations for 3 centuries of exploitation, to be paid over 50 years. Recognition of all human colonies as sovereign territory. Protection for human citizens traveling in alien space. The delegates listened without interrupting. Some of them looked relieved that the demands were not harsher. Others looked resentful but said nothing. They knew they had no choice. The nano-agents were still in their ships. The quantum weapons were still aimed at their homeworlds. Humanity held all the cards now. Most importantly, Nari continued, This document requires a formal apology from every member species of the former assembly. This apology will be broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Every sentient being will hear it. Every child will learn about it in their schools. The crimes of the past will be acknowledged, and the promise of a better future will be made. High Custodian Elveth of the Nymari rose slowly. His tendrils were drooping with exhaustion and defeat. He had aged visibly over the past year. The weight of what his species had done, and what had been done in response, had broken something inside him. "And if we agree to these terms," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, "what then? Will you remove your weapons? Will you let us live without fear?" Nari was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. "The nano-agents will remain in your systems. The quantum weapons will remain aimed at your worlds. They will stay that way until trust is rebuilt." She raised a hand to stop the murmurs of protest. "This is not punishment. This is reality. Trust takes time to build. It takes even longer to rebuild after it has been destroyed." She stepped away from the podium and walked toward the center of the chamber, closer to the alien delegates. "But we do not want to be your rulers. We do not want to be your conquerors. We want to be your partners. Real partners. This time, equals who work together for the good of all." She spread her hands. "Humanity has always been better at building than destroying. We would rather heal than harm. We would rather create than kill." She stopped in front of High Custodian Elveth and looked up at his many eyes. "That choice is now yours. You can accept these terms and begin working with us to build something better. Or you can refuse, and we will continue as we have been. Silent. Waiting. Watching. The demonstrations will continue until you understand that we are serious." The chamber was silent. Every delegate was watching the High Custodian. He was the oldest and most respected among them. If he accepted, the others would follow. If he refused, the fragile peace would shatter. Elveth stood there for a long moment. His tendrils trembled. His many eyes blinked slowly. He was remembering everything. The centuries of cruelty. The laughter in the assembly chamber. The silence that had followed. The fear that now lived in every corner of the galaxy. Slowly, carefully, he lowered himself. His tendrils folded beneath him. His body bent forward. For the first time in recorded history, a Nymari elder was bowing before another species. "We accept," he said. His voice was broken and tired. "We accept your terms. We acknowledge our crimes. We ask for your forgiveness." One by one, the other delegates followed. The Valari representative bent his segmented body in a gesture of submission. The Torath delegate, a young officer who had replaced the disgraced Kothran, knelt with his head lowered. Species after species acknowledged their guilt and accepted humanity's terms. Nari watched them with an expression that held no triumph. Only sadness. Only hope. Only the weight of everything that had been lost and everything that might still be gained. In the observation deck above the chamber, Admiral Teho stood with Sohi beside him. They had started this back in the Crystal Hall a year ago. They had walked out of that chamber and set everything in motion. Now, they were watching it end. "Do you think it will last?" Sohi asked quietly. Teho considered the question. Outside the viewport, Earth glowed blue and green, beautiful and fragile and home. Ships from 100 worlds drifted in peaceful formation around it. The same ships that had been enemies a year ago were now guests. "I do not know," he admitted. "Fear fades over time. Memories grow dim. The next generation may not remember why they should treat us with respect." "Then what was the point of all this?" Teho turned to look at her. His face was tired, but his eyes held a quiet warmth. "The point is that we showed them what is possible. We showed them that the weak can become strong. We showed them that patience has limits, and we showed them that humanity would rather build bridges than burn them." He paused. "We just needed them to understand that we could burn the bridges if we had to." So he nodded slowly. "And now? Now we build. We teach. We work together. Tejo smiled. And for the first time in a year, it was a genuine smile. We make the galaxy into what we always hoped it could be. Not through fear, but through example. Not through weapons, but through cooperation. Below them, Ambassador Nari was shaking hands with High Custodian Elvith. The image was being broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Two species, former enemies, reaching toward a new future. It will be difficult, so he said. Yes, it will take generations. There will be setbacks and failures and moments when everything seems hopeless. Tejo put his hand on her shoulder. But humans are good at difficult. We are good at the long struggle. We are good at not giving up. He looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy that had tried to break humanity and failed. We are also good at hope. Even when hope seems foolish. Even when the darkness seems endless. We hold on to hope. And we keep moving forward. He turned back to the window, watching the ships drift peacefully around their homeworld. That is what makes us human, not our weapons, not our technology, not our anger or our fear. Our hope. Our stubborn, foolish, unbreakable hope. Below them, a new galaxy was beginning. It would not be perfect. It would not be easy. But for the first time in 300 years, humanity was walking into the future as equals, as partners, as something more than prey. The dread had served its purpose. Now it was time to build something better. And humanity, as always, was ready to try.